welcome to the next section of our day of conversation. I'm joined right now by Lauren Hartman and Ada Gessink, and we're going to be talking about body shame and stigma, specifically in youth, which I think is a really important topic and one that resonates for a lot of people right now, whether it's youth yourselves or parents or the people around supporting them. So I'm excited to dive in, but first, Ada, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us why you're joining us for this conversation today?
Yeah, so my name is Ada. I am an ASAP ambassador at Ohio Wesleyan University. So I got involved with Project EDSA, which is like the part of ANOD that interacts with the youth, where they can bring eating disorder awareness, support, and education to high schools and college campuses. And so I got introduced to that, and I brought it to my campus and have been doing a lot of things with that here. I'm not sure if I said it already, but at Ohio Wesleyan University in Ohio. Yeah.
Amazing. Ada, here I am. Sorry, I cut out. But yeah, thank you so much for doing all of that, spreading awareness on campuses, doing that work. It's so important, and it's so much more effective coming from you than from me. So thank you. But yeah, and Lauren, what about you? Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about you and what you're doing here today.
Thank you for having me. So, my name is Lauren Hartman, and I'm a pediatrician and an adolescent medicine specialist. I have a private practice in California, in Northern California, in Berkeley. And I've spent the last 20 years working on prevention and treatment of eating disorders in young people. And this topic is particularly resonating for me over the last many years. I just was seeing patient after patient who would tell me a story about what happened to them at school or at the doctor's office or at home. And so I actually wrote a book that's coming out in 2 weeks called Freeing Children and Young Adults from Shame, Scales, and Stigma, really trying to provide practical tips and scripts and strategies for parents and teachers and clinicians to try to prevent this.
I love that so much. And thank you for that work. As a parent of younger kids myself, I already see it popping up in schools, and it's something I'm excited to have tools to be able to lead on, so I don't feel like I'm reinventing the wheel or saying the wrong thing, which I think a lot of people run into. But to jump right into it, I just want to set the stage for a minute here. But why do we need to be talking about this? Like, how our normal everyday interactions, both on social media, in classrooms, on college campuses, how do those shape young folks, their beliefs about their bodies?
So I can jump in with this, and then I'm so interested to hear what you have to say, Ada. But in my practice, so I take care of people from ages 6 to 30, and when I am meeting young people for the first time who are presenting to me with their eating disorder, I will often ask them, like, when did you first start having some concerns about your weight or your shape or your size? And I just hear over and over and over, like, it was in kindergarten or as far back as I remember. And, certainly the data supports what I'm seeing clinically, and that really young kids are starting to have the body dissatisfaction and are feeling the shame around their body. And, young people are just inundated. I mean, we were all inundated, but young people in particular, just seeing it everywhere, on TV. You're watching the Super Bowl and the commercials in between the, in between the plays, and certainly on social media and in schools. I'm hearing a lot about what's happening in schools in terms of kids getting weighed in PE class and things like that. So, it is just, I think as much as we can do to protect our kids, but also just to arm the adults in their lives with tips and tricks to how to navigate this.
Yeah, so My role over the summer is I'm a peer mentor, like a peer supporter for the Whole Institute, which is an outpatient rehabilitation center. And they're actually where I went to in high school to get my own recovery outpatient services. Um, so I'm now coworkers with my previous therapist and dietitian, which is really, really cool and
It's beautiful.
awesome. But essentially, they will assign me to one of their adolescent clients, and I get to talk to them about my experiences, and we can relate to each other, and I can tell them what motivated me to recover, what inspired my recovery, and a lot of the times they take a lot of inspiration from this coming from someone who has actually gone through the recovery process, who really understands. And a lot of things that we talk about is the huge role that social media has in reinforcing unrealistic body standards and through the manipulation of photographs and videos through filters and artificial intelligence. And an even greater concern is the prevalence of hateful body shaming comments and widespread nutrition misinformation, which we're seeing all over the place. And we are constantly bombarded by cultural messaging about food and weight on a daily basis. It harbors body dissatisfaction, and it is narrowing the body ideal significantly. It's the constant exposure to societal views on food and body weight is very detrimental, especially to adolescent brains who are very malleable at this time. They hear things and it sticks with them, and they bring it with them through the rest of their lives. So that's social media. I think is a huge component in shaping children's internalized beliefs about their bodies.
Yeah. And you named the narrowing standards of beauty, like misinformation about nutrition. And
Yeah.
I think people who aren't growing up with this have a hard time really understanding the impact that that could have. Like I didn't have social media as a young person. I was allowed to have my like awkward preteen phase, and it's not recorded anywhere. I wasn't out looking for ways to change things. So I think it's really important for older folks to really think about this and understand and listen to the people who are in it and what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, my younger sister just got out of middle school, and she talks about how all of her friends are comparing themselves to what is now like considered the thin ideal. This like thin, healthy, lean body physique is like what they're constantly comparing themselves to, which is unrealistic and can't be maintained healthily. And they think, oh, that's what I'm supposed to look like. I'm not, and so they're trying to achieve this body ideal that is just unrealistic.
Yeah. And Lauren, as a pediatrician especially, what can it do to younger kids to be seeing this and trying to change their bodies so early?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting when we think about just the normal development because young kids, like, this is when you're developing your body image and you're developing your sense of self. And I think, Ada, your point is so important in that, like, when you're then not seeing someone that actually looks like you and you're not feeling that sense of belonging, and then you're looking like, how come I don't look like that? It is so damaging. I think just everyone, we all just seek to feel a sense of belonging. And, when we are seeing these manufactured fake images, that's something that is so unrealistic and also undiverse, just lacking in any sort of normal diversity. It just leads young people to just question whether or not they belong and they're normal. And it really does impact their sense of self and their self-esteem. And of course, young people are just at such higher risk for eating disorders. So it's just such a vulnerable time for them and becomes a perfect storm.
And Lauren, having been in this field working with younger folks for a while now, are you seeing shifts towards younger kids, or I guess what have you seen change?
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure we're seeing it younger and younger. I know I mentioned I have, my practice goes down to age 6. That is not, I mean, I'm a pediatrician, but my specialty is adolescent medicine. And so that was a shift that I had to make to go down to see kids, below puberty to like early, elementary school, because I was seeing so many young people with eating disorders and they were just needing help. And so, I was there to like support the pediatrician and say, absolutely, I can see your patient who's 7 years old and help support them. I think the other thing that we're seeing, and that I know you all know, but just for those listening, is, a lot of young boys. When I am often giving talks, I will have parents come up to me and say like, oh, good, I don't have to worry about this. I have boys. And I'm like, oh, but you do, so we're seeing, as like a third of eating disorders in young boys, but especially now with all the, again, with the social media and with all the images of the muscles and the, seeing so much of this muscle dysmorphia, where these young boys are feeling like their muscles aren't big enough. And then, taking protein powder and supplements and very similar overlaps with eating disorder behavior. So, seeing a lot more of that as well.
Yeah. So to kind of dive in and talk about what can we do? Like, what are the different things that the people around all of these young folks can do to make a difference? And I guess to start, for the parents, and again, thinking about myself and my girls here too, but how can parents set kids up to handle the diet talk, both in what they're seeing from maybe relatives or friends, and then what's on social media as well? How can we arm them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is why I wrote the book, for a large reason, because, I was just hearing these questions from parents over and over and over, like, what do I do? And as a parent, it's so hard when we hear our kids struggle and we hear them in distress, or they come home and they say, this thing happened, or we're sitting there and grandma said this comment, And so, I think the first thing that I try to encourage parents, which is really hard to do, but to first just pause for a second, because I think it's so tempting to just kind of jump in and try to just fix it and save it. And I think we first have to really understand what happened, and give our kids the knowing that they're not alone, and that we can handle this conversation, that we're not stressing out, even if we feel that inside. So, I often just say, like, with my kids at home, like, a pause and then like a tell me more. Like, I just really want to understand, just so you can gather your thoughts about what exactly did happen. I think for all our kids too, and this is really hard, especially when we're hearing something from grandma or from the teacher, is also to have a bit of compassion for them, which is hard in that moment, but like, just to remember that they are also swimming in diet culture, right? Like, they have inherited this. Your teacher, that's what your teacher learned. That's what your doctor learned. Like, so just to kind of have a sense of like, this is something that we've all been swimming through, and yet we can do better, but just to kind of take that pause. And then, I think for parents, for sure, to feel comfortable that you are allowed to have your own boundaries in your home. Like, in our home, we actually don't talk about bodies in that way. In our home, we don't talk about calories. We don't have good foods and bad foods in our home. Even having like a set of rules of like, just so you could display it, of like, everybody is welcomed in our home, just to start to give those messages when families are over, just to kind of give a sense of like, this is not what we talk about in our house.
You're laying the groundwork. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ada, what have you seen from parents or teachers or folks around you that has maybe helped or not? I'm curious from your perspective.
Yeah, so when I was going through my eating disorder recovery, I obviously my parents were very involved, and after the recovery process, I spoke with my mom about what types of things she changed. She read a lot of books on what things to do to um help to cultivate an environment where like good and bad foods aren't a thing. There shouldn't be moralizing. You shouldn't be moralizing food. You shouldn't be like moralizing shape and size of bodies and exercise and things like that. So a lot of things that we changed after I went through eating disorder recovery is we actively set boundaries and expectations with our relatives because they don't really know what was going on with me, and I would go see them and they would say, "Oh, you look so much healthier." And those, even though they have good intentions, it can be very harmful for someone who's going through eating disorder recovery to hear something like that. Even and when they make any sort of comments on the body, whether or not it's good or bad, or any comments about how much the child is eating, it can be very detrimental. So I know my family set expectations and boundaries to tell them that we're focusing on um, not engaging in diet talk or body shaming. We're not bringing up labeling food good or bad, not talking about weight. We don't talk about exercise as a way of punishment or making our bodies smaller. We're talking about exercise in the way of it helps us get stronger, it increases our energy, it relieves our stress rather than as like a punishment. Um, and another thing that we talked about was rather than praising a child for their external qualities, praising them for their internal qualities, like their kindness, their creativity, humor, their effort, rather than the way they look or or their body, things like that. I think my mom, we discussed things that she would have done differently if she had been educated, and she said that she would have made an effort to teach her children that bodies are meant to be diverse in shape and size, and this would make the children feel more comfortable and confident in their own bodies if they grew up learning it that way. We would have, instead of saying if you eat all your dinner you can have dessert, and dessert was like like you had to earn it, instead of doing things like that, we would have used neutral terms like growing foods, foods that nourish the body, versus fun foods, foods that you eat for pleasure. And so there's no like bad or good, really, any of those connotations that come with those things. So we we definitely changed the way that we talked and viewed food and body and exercise. And so I'm really glad my little sister got to grow up in that environment, because it was definitely better.
That's really lovely. I want to talk a little bit more about the good and bad food labels because it's pervasive everywhere. Even like grade school kids are labeling foods as, stoplight colors or sometimes all the time healthy, unhealthy. And again, with the grace, I understand that it's coming from people who are trying to be well meaning, who want kids to grow up with a good nutritional foundation and aren't aware that this can be harmful. So, Lauren, can you tell us a little bit about why good and bad isn't the thing and kind of how we can transition, and for other parents watching who are interested in setting their kids up to like eat well, what can you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first things is just to remember like what we want for our kids, right? Like we don't want our kids to feel a tremendous sense of stress when they are going to eat. We want them to have some ease regardless of what is being presented. I love this study, the rabbit study. If you will let me share it for a minute. This was done in the 1970s, and the intent, I think it was in Ohio, Ada, but the
No
intent
way.
of this study was to evaluate how high saturated fat diets impacted the health of rabbits, and the impact in terms of cardiovascular health and atherosclerosis and cholesterol and things like that. So they had these identical rabbits, genetically identical rabbits, that they were feeding the exact same diet to. And what they found was there was one group of rabbits that had like 60% improved, like reduced cardiovascular disease compared to the other one. So there's like this one group that was incredibly healthy, and they did not know why. Like, there doesn't make sense. They're getting the same diet. They're genetically identical. I think we lost Ada.
We did. I'll keep an eye out and let her back in when she logs back on.
And what they found was that this one group of rabbits was actually assigned to a lab technician that was an animal lover. And so when she was feeding the rabbits, she actually held them and she was petting them and talking to them. And, so I think this study is really important in us remembering, like, oh, it's also kindness and decrease our stress in terms of health. And so I think for parents, to your point, everyone's wanting to do the right thing for our kids, but when we are making these rigid rules, that's bad, that's good, that is increasing our stress level, for one. Also, I think it's Una Hansen, or the parenting coach, who will often say, like, to remember that the forbidden fruit is the most sweet, like when we say you can't have this. I mean, I grew up in a household that had no preservatives, and I can tell you the households that I would want to go to, because they have the SpaghettiOs and they have the cereal I want that I'm not allowed in the home. So it doesn't do anything in terms of helping people have a sense of what they like, what they don't like, what are their natural interests. But I will say, I mean, I hear all the time. I actually had a consult this morning with a parent who was really wanting to have a way to protect her kid, was just like, how do I do this? And what do I say? And she was worried because she said her kid was just eating, just really just went for sugar after sugar after sugar. And she was just like, what do I say as a parent? And so, I'll often encourage parents to, never to support restriction, but instead to support structure. So, to sit at a table and sit on a chair and put the food on a plate and, have some structured meal times and things like that, instead of, I think, where we can often run into trouble and where kids can just sort of like lose track of time, especially with screens and video games, and like, oh my God, 6 hours just went by and I just like ate all this food, is like, okay, like those foods aren't bad, but like, how do we put it in a bowl and like have some structure around it so that people can feel they can eat the foods that they want and are having actually regular meals and snack times.
That's amazing. Thank you for this. I love tangible answers, because I feel like so much of what we talk about is so big and scary, and there's all these broad ideas and food philosophies, but tangible things like, oh, in our house we put food in a bowl, knowing that is a helpful thing, I think it's accessible.
I hope so. Yeah, I agree. That's how I like to learn as a parent, is like, tell me what to do.
Yeah. Ada, in your work with peers now and in the ASAP program, I guess, how are you seeing people respond to like the difficult conversations of like, okay, I've got a parent that's worried. What are some things they can do to start a conversation without scaring people away if they are concerned?
If they're concerned for their child.
Yeah.
I think that I've actually spoken to a lot. I always speak to the parent before I'm speaking to the adolescent. And so a lot of the times I tell them that they should prepare what they're going to say, and they should also educate themselves on eating disorders before going into the conversation. Because a lot of the times parents don't understand that eating disorders are a disease, and it can result in the child lying, and they need to remember that they're not lying and being secretive because of their relationship with you. They're doing that because it's a symptom of the illness, which is something that they need to understand. It's important to ask the child what they need to show that you care and that you are concerned. And then I guess trying to find a way to help them realize that maybe having professional help would be beneficial. To a lot of clients, I ask them, like, if their eating disorder behaviors are causing them to have like a disruption in their life and their happiness and their like overall well-being. And a lot of times, um, I I I ask them like, wouldn't you rather have a better quality of life than always be focusing on these obsessive and uh, behaviors that are really anxiety provoking and detrimental, and they take over your mind and they distract you from other parts of your life. Um, I think that parents should um, like hold activities with their children, hang out with their children in ways that don't involve food, like
Mm.
such as like hobbies and things like that. Not everything should revolve around food.
Yeah.
And then also discussing like meal plans and then making a way that would work for both the parent and the child. Also being a good role model, like a lot of the times a parent will also be having disordered eating and disordered exercise habits that rub off on the child. So it's important that parents are demonstrating healthy, balanced eating and a healthy amount of exercise, because a child will see that and think that that is the proper way to go about things.
Yes. Oh, so important. Lauren, what about you? Anything to add to that?
I think, first of all, I love your answers, Ada. So thank you for everything you said. I like very much echo it all. I would say one thing that I just hope every parent can hear is to trust their gut, because I hear so often from parents that they had concerns, but they just were afraid they would make it worse if they said anything. um, or that they, well, maybe I'll just wait, or, I'm just not sure, but they know, I think when they have that like spidey sense of concern, I really try to encourage parents to say something and to trust that, because, as we know, like early intervention is so much more effective. So if they can get help early rather than waiting for help. um, I think the other thing that I think is important for parents to know is that every professional is not trained to manage eating disorders or to know or to recognize it. So just because their doctor's not concerned, or maybe the teacher said it's fine, doesn't mean that they know better than the parent. And so I'll often say to parents, like, if you are concerned and if you bring your concern to your doctor and your doctor's like, I don't know, the labs are fine, or they don't look like they have an eating disorder, or something else that can just be incredibly dismissive, but is also just a lack of education, to feel that they don't need to stop there, that they can follow up and ask for a second opinion or try to get eating disorder specialized help, because parents often do really know. And I think the waiting until things are worse is just harder and harder to treat.
Yeah. And something that we remind people whenever we get the chance, that I'm going to do now, is that eating disorders are a spectrum, right? Like no one has either 100% perfect relationship with food in their body, or they meet every single criteria for diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Most people live somewhere in the middle, and it's okay to reach out for help before you get to the point of being way on this side. So,
Yes.
yeah. Ida, from what you shared, it really sounds like your parents were really phenomenal. They made a lot of changes for you, did some advocating, and you shared a little bit about what that looked like in your house, and props to your parents. And I'm wondering too, what did it look like for them to advocate for you with teachers, with schools, with like other providers? Because that's different, right? At home, you're in control, but outside of that, you're kind of less so.
Yeah. So I had a team of providers. I went to inpatient treatment, so then they kind of set it up. They set up a system for me when I was then transitioning to outpatient. But when it came to school and things like that, um, my parents reached out to the counseling services, and they told them what I was going through and helped them to understand. But it also happened in 2020, so we were pretty isolated. So I wasn't actually interacting with many people. I wasn't actually leaving my house much. So I didn't have I didn't have other people influencing my recovery. Um, but I can say on my campus now, that counseling services are not well versed. They're not trained specifically in eating disorder support and rehabilitation and things like that. I've heard from a large amount of students that they've gone to counseling services for support with these kinds of concerns, and counseling services didn't really know how to support them, or they didn't really know who to refer them to. And so that was another reason why I wanted to bring EDSA to my campus. We're actually getting trained currently by ANID's peer support group facilitation training program. So that's something we're doing right now, so we can have a support group on campus for students, that counseling services is going to refer students to our support group if they're struggling with these issues, because we will be trained to properly deal with this. And it's not counseling services' fault, because eating disorders are such a detrimental illness, especially for young minds that are now going through this huge life transition. And it requires such specific support and resources that can be very difficult to acquire. So I can say that most schools don't really have an adequate support system for students with eating disorders. So something that I did to try to combat this was I went and presented at district convention for CKI, which is Circle K International. They're a service and leadership organization. So me and another one of my EDSA exec members presented on Project EDSA and why everyone should have an EDSA chapter on their campus, because counseling services are not usually adequately trained for something like this. But yeah.
Way to turn into your own advocate and an advocate for everyone around you and campuses. It's really, really phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Lauren, back to the idea of like tangible things that, like, if we can give parents some tools, what can they do if they see a provider who's being dismissive, or educators doing the good bad kind of teaching about foods in schools?
Well, I mean, I would say prevention is the best approach, if at all possible. So, I think if they are working with a new doctor, or they are going to see their doctor, for a new appointment, or they are with a new teacher, any opportunity to kind of reach out ahead of time, I think is really helpful. And I know there's a couple of bad lemons out, but for the most part, people who work with kids really want to do the right thing. And so I think if parents, and I like, give scripts and emails and things that they can literally send to the doctor ahead of time, or the teacher. But even just to say in our appointment, please don't discuss weight or BMI. Or, in our appointment, can we just make sure that we're talking about modifiable health behaviors, things like sleep and screen time and stress reduction, things that actually are meaningful. And, I think for the schools is as much as they can do to reach out ahead of time. But I think also for parents, it is really hard. And I know I'm a doctor, and so it's hard for me to advocate for myself with the doctor. So I get it, like for my own kid, but we have to be our kids' advocate, because they can't do it themselves, especially for our younger, the younger kids. So to feel really comfortable to pull the doctor aside, I would say ideally not in front of the child because we're trying to not undermine the relationship. We're not in front of the teacher, but like, hey, this is what I noticed, and this is the impact that it had on my kid. And you can always switch doctors. I think for parents, like if it isn't landing, if you're having these conversations about what didn't go well and how you wish things had gone better, there are much more weight inclusive, supportive ways to navigate it. And if the doctor isn't open to that, or if the practice isn't open to that, there are ways to navigate just finding somebody else. But, I think aiming to just, they don't know, and how do we just educate, and how do we give them some more resources of what I saw in my kid and how this impacted them and how we would love to see a shift.
I love it. And ultimately, it comes down to parents speaking up, feeling like they're able to do that for their kids, especially for younger kids. You have to be that advocate. So we have been talking a lot about parents so far, but let's pivot and talk about educators, like the professors, the teachers, people on campus. I guess they have a really big impact too. And so for anyone listening who is an educator, what can they do? Like, what role do educators have in helping students develop healthier relationships with their bodies?
Well, one, sort of similar to the parents is, I think educators have a really important role in terms of modeling. And, modeling, we all eat lunch, modeling the language that we use about food and about bodies and things like that. So I think the language is incredibly impactful. One of the things why I decided to include schools in my book was, a couple of reasons. The first was I kept hearing students who were sharing with me what happened to them after their health class, where they were learning about sugar being bad in health class. And, these are middle schoolers, vulnerable ears who were like, oh, I want to do something that's bad. I want to do something that's healthy, and making the shifts. So, I think really, just seeing what an incredible opportunity the schools actually do have to provide education about how all foods are okay, to provide education about eating disorders, to provide education about, the social media stuff that we were talking about earlier, and ways in which, how do we navigate it? How do we critically analyze social media? So we're like not pawns in this whole game, but we're kind of, understanding what's happening. But then the other reason, to be honest, why I included them in this book is because, I live in, like I mentioned, Northern California, pretty progressive area of the country. And I was appreciating that my kids who are in high school and middle school were learning about all sorts of injustices and all sorts of discrimination. And they were not learning about weight discrimination. And they were not learning about ways in which to make environments incredibly inclusive for everybody. And so I think schools have an awesome opportunity, and again, from a prevention perspective, is including weight discrimination as part of the anti-discriminatory language and education that they're giving kids. Unfortunately, weight discrimination does remain this like socially acceptable form of discrimination. I mean, we just sort of normalize it in advertising and in doctors' offices and in education. And our young kids, I just have so much hope that the young kids, thank you, Ada, are the ones, you're not a kid, but like young people, like, look what you do. Like, you are the future. And so if we can help educate young people about, like, that's not okay. It's not okay to talk about people in this way. Like, it's actually incredibly impactful.
Ada, what have you seen from the educators around you, or what are you trying to change on your campus?
Yeah, so I think that in health classes, part of the curriculum should be body positivity and acceptance. And it should be taught that all bodies are worthy of respect, regardless of shape or size. It should also be taught that everyone is born with their own body. There is no specific way we are supposed to look. It should be taught. There should be a curriculum that teaches media literacy, like what you said about evaluating social media claims. proper nutrition without the restrictive messaging. And like it rather than students being assigned in health classes to track their caloric intake, which is something that I had to do in high school.
Yeah.
In health class, I think that instead of doing something like that, it should be taught to what is known as adding rather than subtracting. So like adding color, fiber, more protein to your meals, like instead of removing things that are considered bad. I think that kind of view on nutrition, and also promoting intuitive movement rather than movement for weight management. Physical activity should be joyful and used for self-care rather than a way to control weight or a punishment. Another thing that we see with um, a lot of coaches and athletic trainers is them like teaching students to control their diets. That includes like tracking portions, macronutrients, and calories, which creates these fixations. It should be taught that rather athletes should be fueling themselves intuitively, eating when they're hungry, stopping when they're full, balancing nutritious foods with foods that they love, things like that. But for the health curriculum in general, I think that they should be focusing on integrating that body positive movement that accepts all bodies as healthy bodies, rather than trying to make everybody fit into the normal BMI range. Like that's BMI shouldn't even be taught as part of the health curriculum, in my opinion. Yeah, I could rant about that forever.
I will come to your TED Talk every time.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I'm really glad the coaches though, Ada, because I also see that as such an important opportunity that we have to I think often we've sort of like at least in the eating disorder community, of like, that coach said this thing, that coach said this thing. Really, like, how do we invite them into this conversation so that they are like helping kids understand the importance of sleep, the importance of, like, if you didn't have lunch, you can't practice, like you have to have, an extra snack because we had a big practice today, helping them really message some of these important real health messages, I think, is because they are such an important relationship with young athletes, and athletes, as we know, are at such higher risk for eating disorders.
Yeah, and rather than tracking like calories and macronutrients portion sizes, I think that that athletic trainers should be more focused on analyze your energy levels. Are you sleeping well? Do you feel anxious? Things like that. Do you need to refuel? Things like that. I know a lot of athletic culture tends to link lower weight to speed and athletic success. And then a lot of athletic students think that this lean physique promotes their performance, and they prioritize that lean physique over feeling healthy, which is terrible. And then also this idea of cultural toughness, or being able to tough it out, not showing weakness and disregarding pain and fatigue, which pretty much mirrors the psychology of eating disorders and can be very detrimental, especially to students who are predisposed to these issues.
A lot of the things that make a really disciplined athlete can also make for a really good eating disorder.
Yes.
And it can be hard to tell the difference.
Yeah.
Which, I think speaks to why education is so important, and understanding that there are resources out there. And if you're someone who's not eating disorder focused, noticing and getting that person connected to someone who can really help is one of the best things that you
completely
can do.
Yeah.
Ada, I just wanted to mention, when you were talking about food and like bringing in lots of colors, that's a thing I do with my kids now. We try to count all the different colors on our plate every day, and we get excited if we can make like a rainbow for the day, and it makes it a really fun way to try to bring in a variety of things, which
Yeah.
is fun because mine are in the picky phase right now, at least one of them. So
Mhm. And yeah, I'm a college student and I'm triple majoring in biology, nutrition, and zoology. That one happened by accident, but because I changed my major 7 times. But anyway, as a nutrition student, we learn a lot about how to like teach people how to eat healthily, and so I'm learning how to teach. I'm giving these cooking classes to these older individuals, teaching them how to eat more healthy, and I'm like, how do I do that while also doing peer mentoring where I'm teaching young children how not to be afraid of ice cream? You know, it's like it's hard, and that adding rather than subtracting idea really is the way to go. I think it's a very beneficial to add more colors to your meal is the whole idea. It doesn't have any moralizing of food as good and bad, and it's something I can tell everybody.
strawberry ice cream was our pink food the other day, along with the green broccoli for our rainbow. So it counts. You know,
Yeah.
we got the rainbow in that day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess, all right, as we've talked about educators and parents, but what about clinicians, doctors, therapists? So if you're a specialist, how do you explain to parents and maybe other providers that a kid, a child, a young person can be healthy without leaning on the scale and BMI and weight as a primary metric? Lauren, I'll give this one to you first.
Okay. I think in order to do that, we have to back up and just define health, because I
No
hear,
big deal. Super casual, easy to do.
and I say this because I hear all the time. I mean, it is like why people come, no one comes to me. And again, I take care of people with eating disorders. Nobody comes to me because they wanted to have an eating disorder. The intent was really, I wanted to get healthy, or I wanted to make these changes that I heard were healthy. Or a parent says, I wanted my kid to get healthy. And so we just have to really like dial that down a bit of like, what actually do we mean? Because when people are coming to me, their hair is falling out and they have fainted and they are constipated, and that is not health. So, we just have to be clear that it is not the same. I love what you were saying, Ada, in terms of rather than thinking about numbers, thinking about the function, right? Like thinking about how do we actually want to feel? How do we make sure that our kids have energy, sustainable energy, to be able to do the things that they love and to be able to concentrate in school and that they're well rested, all of these other things that actually have much more important meanings in terms of health, rather than, what a number on the scale means. And so again, I think really helping our doctors and clinicians shifting to things that, one, are modifiable, because like just saying a number, a weight is not a modifiable behavior, but what is modifiable is like getting this, having limits on the time that you're on the screen. And we know that the more time kids are on the screen, the impact it has on their mental health and their well-being. You mentioned joyful movement earlier, Ada. Like helping our kids like figure out what's fun and how to move their body for fun. Helping them feel relaxed around food and remembering that food is for joy and for connection and for nourishment and for satisfaction, and not something that we have to be feared. So I think really just helping people look at how do we actually want to feel, and then what are the behaviors that help us get there. Sleep, stress reduction, eating regularly and consistently, getting outside, turning off the screens, things like that we know are healthy.
Mm-hmm. Ada, that speaks a lot to what you were talking about before from coaches too. And I wonder, okay, what are some of your like personal metrics of like, okay, I'm feeling good. I'm healthy now.
Yeah, so I knew I was healthy when I wasn't thinking about food anymore, first of all. When you're when you're ill, it's a you're not healthy yet when you're constantly thinking about it's the food noise.
Mhm.
But also in general, like my energy levels, my sleep quality, my overall happiness, my sense of anxiety. I know I'm not healthy when I have this like internal feeling of restlessness.
Mm.
That's not normal. um
Mhm.
when I have the energy for my goals, my life aspirations, when I'm feeling motivated and inspired, that's when I know I'm healthy. Um and I when I just feel like I have a good emotional well-being, um, and I can connect with others. I have the energy to hang out with my friends. I can concentrate in class. Things like that. I feel strong. Like I
Mm.
could go for a run if I wanted to. I could lift something really heavy and it would be fine. Like I know I'm good. Like
That's amazing. And Ada, as well, what would you say to someone who's maybe listening to you and thinking like, I don't have that, but I don't know if I'm bad enough to like do anything about it?
I think that if you have an inkling, you should get help. If if you're having those thoughts, then you know that part of you is not happy with your situation, and it would be beneficial even just to talk to someone about it and see if there are resources that you can reach out to get help. And maybe they can do a full analysis and give you suggestions of things that you can do. Um, Personally, I suggest doing a really nice yoga class because that's what I do, to ensure my emotional well-being. Um, but I think that if definitely if you're having that thought that I I I'm not happy, I feel frail, I'm tired, I'm just not happy, then I suggest reaching out.
Yeah,
Because it's not normal to be tired and unmotivated and uninspired and not having energy to do the things you love. It's not normal.
amazing. All right, Lauren, for those people, like say that person goes to a doctor who's maybe looking at growth and development because this is still a growing person. How how can you check that without triggering body shame or anxiety? And what are some of the markers that clinicians should be looking at instead to get a picture of someone's well-being?
I think it's an important opportunity again for education. I think young people and all of us, learn from the doctor often. And so I think I think it's important for doctors to help kids understand that they are supposed to continue to grow and continue to gain weight through their early 20s. After they've gained adult height, they should still be gaining weight because their organs are still gaining volume. Their bones should still be gaining bone density. So I think that's the first thing is just to kind of normalize weight gain, that is the expectation. Again, because I think we're hearing so much in media or that weight gain is somehow bad, but just to normalize that's actually healthy. When people aren't gaining weight at a time when they're supposed to, that is more concerning to me. I think the other important opportunity doctors have is to help kids and parents understand that healthy growth and healthy growth curves are really individualized, so that we are not comparing you to your sibling or you to your friend, but really we want to make sure you are on your own individual health curve, and that, sorry, I'm going like this, as the growth curve, and that you are growing healthily the way that your body is supposed to. And that is not the 50th percentile for everybody. That's literally not how it works, right? So your curve may be higher, and that's great for you. If people are crossing their percentiles or losing weight during a time when they're supposed to be gaining, or gaining significant weight, crossing percentiles, those are things we just want to understand a little bit more and do a little bit more investigation to try to understand what is going on. I think as doctors, we do care about data. So I think it is important to make sure that people are growing, but we don't have to always be displaying the growth curve in front of everybody. It is something that we, for kids, we need to know that they're growing, but it's something that we actually can check in our back office and say, you're growing nicely, or you're on your curve. It doesn't have to be like this report card that's getting presented to somebody. And then some of the health markers that we do, really want to make sure are normal are things like blood pressure with an appropriate size cuff, because sometimes the wrong size cuff is used, and especially for people who are in bigger bodies and they get told that they have a high blood pressure. They don't. They're just being used. The wrong size blood pressure cuff is being used. Things like blood glucose or hemoglobin A1C or cholesterol, because I'll often hear from parents like, I'm worried my kid's going to get diabetes, or I'm worried. The reason why I'm doing these things is I'm worried about that. And it's a blood test that we can check, and we can check labs and make sure that there isn't any sign of diabetes or pre-diabetes. I think making sure sleep quality is okay is important with young kids. Stress management, joyful movement. Again, what does nutrition look like? And what I'll often say to doctors is to really ask people, like, what did you eat today? Really get specific about it, because they or their parents may say, I ate fine, she eats fine. But like, if it's 3:00 and you have had an apple, that's not okay. We want to make sure that you've had breakfast and a snack and lunch and something else, so just really getting specific of like, tell me the last 24 hours what you've eaten can be really helpful.
Wow. I really want to keep talking, but we're about to run out of time. So Lauren, really quickly, could you tell us just a little bit about your book, where we can find it?
Thank you. Yes, the book, it's a very long title, so bear with me, but it's called Freeing Children and Young Adults from Shame, Scales, and Stigma. It's a practical guide for parents, teachers, and clinicians. So it's really meant to be practical. It's meant to be like for a busy mom, doctor, teacher who's like, just tell me the thing to do. You can pre-order it now on Amazon or Routledge, but it's coming out March 11th.
That's incredible. Thank you for working on that.
Thank you.
And Ada, last question for you. What's one word or phrase that we should immediately remove from our vocabulary when talking to kids and young people about their bodies?
Probably fat or skinny or chubby. I can't avoid all even well-meaning comments about a child's weight or size, because this can lead to poor body image and body shaming.
There's so many more important things to talk about. Yeah. Thank you so much to both of you. It is really wonderful talking to you. I appreciate you so much having this conversation, especially during Eating Disorders Awareness Week. So thanks for helping spread awareness. You're both wonderful.
Glad to be here.
Yep, glad to be here.
All right, then thank you, everyone. We'll